the little girl's voice cut through the freezing December air like a knife. "Daddy, her baby is freezing." Marcus Chin stopped in his tracks, his daughter Emma tugging frantically at his coat sleeve, pointing toward the shadowy alcove between two buildings. In that moment, beneath the glow of Chicago's Christmas lights, he had no idea that what he was about to discover would shatter everything he thought he knew about success, failure, and what truly matters in life. If stories like this touch your heart, please subscribe to Sage Stories and hit that like button. We share real stories of kindness and human connection that remind us of the good in this world. Drop a comment below and tell us about a moment of compassion that changed your perspective. Marcus Chin had built an empire by the age of 35. His tech company employed over 200 people, and his calendar was a masterpiece of back-to-back meetings, investor calls, and strategic planning sessions. But none of that prepared him for single fatherhood. When his wife passed away 2 years ago, leaving him alone with 6-year-old Emma, the confident CEO found himself fumbling through bedtime stories and school pickups, trying to fill a void that felt impossibly vast. Tonight was supposed to be simple. The company Christmas party had just ended, and he'd promised Emma hot chocolate at their favorite cafe before heading home. But Emma had seen something he'd walked right past. She pulled him toward the alcove, and there, huddled against the brick wall, sat a young woman wrapped in a threadbare blanket. She couldn't have been more than 25. In her arms, she cradled an infant, maybe 3 months old, bundled in layers of clothing that still seemed desperately inadequate against the bitter cold. The woman's eyes met Marcus's, and he saw something there that made his chest tighten. Not desperation. Not pleading. Just exhaustion so deep it seemed to emanate from her very bones. Emma didn't wait for her father's permission. She walked right up to the woman and said, "Hi, I'm Emma. What's your baby's name?" The woman's lips trembled into something almost resembling a smile. "This is Riley," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the cold. Emma knelt down, completely unconcerned about her fancy party dress touching the dirty pavement. "Riley is so pretty." "But Daddy, she's shivering." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. Here was his daughter, who'd lost her mother, who sometimes cried herself to sleep, showing more courage and compassion than he'd managed in months of rushing past people in need. He crouched down beside Emma. "I'm Marcus. When did you last eat?" The woman, who said her name was Sarah, looked away. "We're okay," she said, but her body told a different story. Her hands shook, and not just from the cold. What happened next, Marcus would later realize, wasn't heroism. It was simply being human. He couldn't walk away. He couldn't leave Sarah and Riley on that street corner on a night when the temperature was dropping toward 15 degrees. "There's a diner 2 blocks down," he said. "Please, let us buy you dinner. It's warm inside." Sarah hesitated, pride and desperation warring in her eyes. Emma reached out and gently touched Riley's tiny hand. "Please," the little girl said softly. "I want to make sure Riley is warm." In the diner's fluorescent glow, over plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes that Sarah ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days, the story spilled out. Sarah had been a nursing student, 3 months from graduation, when she discovered she was pregnant. The baby's father disappeared. Her family, religious and unforgiving, had turned their backs on her. She'd tried to work, to finish school, to keep her small apartment, but childcare was impossible to afford, and eventually the rent checks bounced. 2 weeks ago, she and Riley had been evicted. Since then, they'd been moving between shelters, but most were full. Tonight, they'd been turned away from 3 different places. Marcus listened, Emma's hand in his, and felt ashamed of how he'd been living. Ashamed of complaining about traffic, about difficult clients, about the trivial inconveniences that filled his days while people like Sarah fought just to keep their babies warm. He looked at Emma, who was gently making faces at Riley, coaxing small gurgles from the infant. His daughter understood something he'd forgotten. Compassion wasn't complicated. It was just showing up. It was just seeing people. He made a decision that he didn't overthink, because overthinking was what had made him walk past 100 Sarahs before tonight. "I have a guest house," he said. "Behind my home. It's just sitting empty. You and Riley could stay there. No rent. Just until you get back on your feet." Sarah stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "I can't," she said, but her voice broke on the words. "I can't accept that. You don't even know me." Marcus smiled, a real smile, the first one that had felt genuine in longer than he could remember. "You're right. I don't know you. But my daughter does, and she's a better judge of character than I'll ever be. Emma nodded solemnly. Riley needs to be warm, and you need to sleep. My daddy has lots of rooms. We have a Christmas tree too. Riley should see it. The simplicity of a child's logic cut through every adult complication. Sarah started to cry, quiet tears that she wiped away quickly with the back of her hand. Why would you do this? She asked. You don't owe us anything. Marcus thought about his late wife, about how she'd always stopped to help, always seen the humanity in everyone. He thought about the men he'd become, so focused on success that he'd stopped seeing the people right in front of him. Maybe I needed you as much as you need this, he said quietly. The guest house had been his wife's art studio. It had a small kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, and large windows that let in the morning light. Marcus hadn't been inside since she died, couldn't bear to face the easels and half-finished paintings. But tonight, with Emma directing operations like a tiny general, they cleaned and prepared the space. They brought blankets, installed a portable heater, stocked the kitchen with groceries. Sarah kept stopping, overwhelmed, touching things like she couldn't believe they were real. Riley, finally warm and fed, slept peacefully in a borrowed bassinet. What Marcus didn't expect was how helping Sarah would help him heal. Over the following weeks, as Sarah settled in, as she found her footing again, something shifted in the main house too. Emma laughed more. Marcus found himself coming home earlier, looking forward to checking in on their guests, to seeing Riley's toothless smiles, to hearing about Sarah's progress as she reached out to her former college about completing her degree. Sarah insisted on helping however she could. She cooked meals that filled the house with warmth. She listened when Emma talked about missing her mother. She understood grief in a way that didn't require words. Marcus helped Sarah with more than just housing. He connected her with a lawyer who helped her apply for aid she qualified for but hadn't known existed. He reached out to contacts at the hospital where she'd been studying, advocating for her readmission. His HR director found childcare resources. But Sarah wasn't just receiving. She was teaching them, showing them resilience, showing them that strength wasn't about never falling but about getting back up even when the world had knocked you down hard. 3 months later, on a sunny March morning, Sarah walked across the stage at her nursing school graduation. Marcus and Emma were there, cheering louder than anyone, with Riley dressed in a tiny cap and gown that Emma had insisted they buy. Sarah had secured a position at the children's hospital, had saved enough for a deposit on an apartment. She was ready to step into her new life. But she wasn't stepping away from the Chens. They'd become family in the way that transcends biology, bound by the choice to show up for each other. On Sarah's last night in the guest house, as they packed her belongings, she turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. You saved our lives, she said. Marcus shook his head. You saved mine, he replied. You reminded me what matters. You showed Emma and me how to live again. It was Emma, wise beyond her years, who put it best. We all saved each other, she said simply. That's what families do. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest acts of noticing. Marcus had walked past countless people in need, insulated by his success and his grief. But the moment he stopped, the moment he chose to see Sarah and Riley as human beings deserving of dignity and compassion, everything changed. He didn't just offer shelter. He offered recognition, respect, and the fundamental belief that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. The truth is, we all have the power to change someone's life. We all pass by people who are struggling, fighting battles we know nothing about, holding on by threads we can't see. What if we stopped? What if we looked them in the eyes and asked their story? What if we offered not just charity but connection, not just help but hope? Marcus learned that kindness isn't about having all the resources. It's about using what you have, whether that's a guest house or just your time and attention. Sarah learned that accepting help isn't weakness. It's courage. And Emma, blessed with the wisdom children sometimes carry, learned what she probably already knew. Love multiplies when you share it. If this story moved you, share your own experiences with kindness in the comments. Tell us about a time someone helped you when you needed it most, or when you had the chance to make a difference in someone's life. These stories matter. They remind us that in a world that can feel cold and indifferent, there are still people who choose warmth, who choose to see each other, who choose love. Be one of those people. You never know whose life you might save, or how saving theirs might save your own.